Hello.
Hi there. Okay, that was not as hard as I thought it was going to be.
1 second.
Sure.
What'd you say?
I said that was not as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Good. I'm glad it was simple. How's the day coming?
So far, so good. So you need me to record it on my end, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Are you on a Mac or a like PC?
I'm on a Mac, so I'll use QuickTime. I'm also going to use my phone because I think it might be better quality.
Yeah, that way you get backup.
Yeah, just in case.
Sweet. It'll also record like automatically through this, through the computer. Do you have headphones? Like a headset?
I do, but I feel like they recorded weird when I tried them. But I can test it out real quick.
Check. Check.
I feel like they were fuzzy last time I tried recording with them because I teach Skillshare classes online, and I just use my phone to record because it's been the clearest, surprisingly.
If you get good feed from your phone, then what this will do, it'll just make sure that my voice isn't in your recording.
Gotcha. Okay. Let me just check and see if QuickTime is still recording through the speakers. I'm not sure how to do that. Well, if not, this is still recording.
Cool. That sounds fun to me. So yeah, we haven't actually gotten to meet yet. I think you've talked to my brother a couple times, but
yeah,
we're not totally interchangeable. So like I am a different human being. So yeah, it's good to actually meet you.
Yeah, you as well.
Where are you hailing from?
I am originally from New York, and now I am in the Austin area. Oh, you guys are in Dallas, right?
Yeah, super cool. Yeah. Welcome to Texas.
Texas.
Yeah. Are you a full-fledged Texan now? Did you get the driver's license?
I did actually. So this is pre-podcast recording, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll repeat this, but I served with St. Paul's Outreach for 3 years, and 2 of those years I served at Texas State. So I was there.
That's where my brother is.
Oh, really? Cool. Yeah. So I got my license when I was there, and then I moved back home to New York for a year. Long story short, I injured my ankle and needed surgery, and just wanted to do that from home with my
bad ankle injury.
Yeah. And so I was home for 2 years and then just recently moved back. So I've been a Texan for a little while now.
Are you more Texan than New Yorkan now?
Probably not. I don't worship Texas, so I'm not a true Texan.
Yeah, you're not all the way in yet. But if you're living in Austin, it'll get you.
Oh, I love Texas. I mean, there's a reason I moved back. It's just
totally.
You take the girl out of New York, but you can't take the New York out of the girl, right?
Totally. Yeah. Wait, so SPO has an outreach at San Marcos? Or sorry, Texas State. Wow. I cannot believe that. I did not know that. I'm gonna.
When was Marcelino there?
Oh, Marcelino isn't there. My little brother Nick is there right now.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. They've got a full-fledged chapter there.
Okay. Great. I'm gonna tell him to go and make it happen. Yeah. Great news. This is good news for my brother. Yeah. Wait, so okay, you did SPO. Did you get linked up to SPO when you were in New York?
No, I went to school at Benedictine College.
Gotcha.
And there's a chapter there as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So I'm familiar with Focus, Net, SPO, that other one, Family Missions Company. Like I have so many friends in mission work that I've been exposed to all of them. But yeah, I served with St. Paul's Outreach after graduating from Benedictine.
Is that when you started writing your book?
I started writing my book a long time ago. So I got the idea for it about 6 years ago, I want to say 6 or 7, right after I transferred to Benedictine. So I was originally going to school in California, transferred, and that's about the time when I got the idea. But I wasn't actually working on it that whole time. I just like had the idea and would write down notes and scenes and whatever. But it wasn't until towards the end of my 3rd year of SPO and when I moved back to New York that I really like sat down and was like, okay, I'm going to write this book. Because then I was post-surgery in bed, no excuses to not write this novel. I was like, all right, well, here we go. And yeah, so I wrote the book I wrote the first draft in 10 months. And then the second draft took a year.
Gotcha.
Because I kind of slacked off a little bit. So ultimately, like it was like a 2-year project that started 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah. That's I definitely want to talk about that during the podcast.
Okay.
I think it's like really I mean, you just have a lot of different things that you've done that are sort of like eclectic, you know what I mean? So it's a good not a lot of people that I know that are like doing graphic design / running an agency have also like written a book, especially not like a non-fit or a fiction like novel. You know what I mean? Dystopian. Yeah. I'm pumped to hear about it. So are there like any of those questions that were like on the primer that you're like, that's a funny question. Like I could totally talk about that.
Yeah, let me pull it up real quick. I was just looking at them. There were a few. I like went through and made sure I could give at least one answer to all of them. But kind of the culmination of what I felt like I ended up wanting to talk about with all of them was the whole idea of being a creative and how that is part of being made in the image and likeness of God, and kind of like the challenges that come with that. And like, I'm sure other people have talked about this, but it's something that a lot of creatives struggle with, is just recognizing that it's okay to be a creative and it's okay to be paid as a creative and whatnot. Because after leaving mission work, that was really difficult for me, was like being okay with the fact that I could just be what God made me to be and not feel guilty that I wasn't a missionary anymore. But actually I am. It just looks very different and it's a lot less showy.
Great.
And so that was one like major theme. And then also just like the drive or the mission kind of plays into that. But the question on like what drives you and what's your core mission, like I've narrowed that down to hope and mercy, are kind of the driving forces. And I've got like some stories behind that, with like my family. I've got 2 family members who have committed suicide. So depression is like a really big thing in my life. And so hope is a really big thing that I want to spread. And then mercy is this came out of the blue in my prayer. The Lord was just like, you need to have a devotion to divine mercy. And I'm like, okay, I don't know why. But the more I've talked to other people, the more I've realized that this is really like a movement of the Holy Spirit in the church right now, kind of calling us back to the reality of not only our need to have mercy on other people, but also the fact that we need to receive God's mercy, and that's so pivotal to being Catholic. And that kind of ties into the whole, like, what do Catholics not know, or whatever that other question was. So, yeah, those were kind of the two main things that I kept finding myself coming back to throughout all the questions.
That's so good.
You can go in whatever direction you want with that.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely also want to hear about your homeschool family logo, because there's very few people that I've met that where they've done like a family branding process and treated their family sort of like an institution, you know, my family being one of those. So yeah, I would love to hear about that project as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Does that fit in any way to like any of those themes that you were just talking about?
I mean, I was going to talk about my background, and because one of those questions was like, what kid were you in high school? And I was like, oh, I don't feel like that question really works for me, because it's like I was normal. I don't know. But I was going to talk about homeschooling and how that has impacted pretty much everything from like my college experience to my missionary experience to my 9-to-5 experience to now freelance work. Because like my work ethic is very different from a lot of other people's, because I was taught through homeschooling just to take responsibility for my own education and my own work, because there was a time when I slacked off so much that I got 5 months worth of work behind. And my mom like took away everything. She took away my phone privileges. I couldn't see friends. Like I couldn't do anything. And so I was pissed. But it propelled me to get all 5 months worth of work done in 5 weeks. Yeah. And I could do that because I was homeschooled. And like that taught me just that it was on me if I wanted to learn, if I wanted to succeed, if I wanted to get stuff done. And now being a freelancer, I realized that has been so helpful, because no one is here to tell me that I have to set an alarm, or that I can't watch a whole season of Netflix, or like in one sitting. You know, it's on me. And that is definitely something that I learned from being homeschooled. And then also, in kind of along the same lines, my faith is on me. You know, I'm no longer an SPO. I don't have the structure of like, oh yeah, I'm in a formation group or whatever. It's on me if I want to get up and go to mass, or if I want to get my butt to confession or pray every single day. And being from such an awesome Catholic family has also impacted that. So I don't know if that quite, I guess like I could find ways to combine it and make a tangent. Okay. Because the logo, like my mom's whole mission that she ended up coming to was Philippians 4:8, which is the one that says, whatever is lovely, whatever is noble, yada, yada, think about these things. And that's also a verse I come back to a lot in my own creative work.
You can see the creative heritage there. Like, if that's core to her, it makes total sense that you're sort of like this Renaissance woman of like many artistic, meditations and interests. So that was part of why I was interested in it. The logo being the conch with like the golden ratio in it. It just says a lot about like creativity and beauty and all of that. So anyway, but this is gold, so I don't want to like waste it on pre-podcast conversation. Usually the way that we do this is we just like start recording, and then like whenever the conversation feels like it becomes sort of podcasty, then we just go. So there's not like we push the red button and now we're starting the podcast. You know, it's just like have the conversation and then cut into it whenever we feel like it starts to become really relevant. Sure. And unfortunately, like a lot of the stuff that we just said was like awesome. So maybe I'll figure out. I
can repeat. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
And you're gonna go and edit things, right? Sometimes I put my foot in my mouth.
You know, vulnerability is like a core value of the Catholic creative community. So like it's all raw. No, we'll cut out like anything that feels boring. But so far so good. I haven't been bored yet, so I'll let you know though if you're boring me.
Okay, Becca, you're boring. Hurry up.
Yeah. No, but okay. So I wanted to start with just sort of like the things that you've done that are really interesting. As I've sort of like checked out your stuff from afar. One being like a running a creative agency, also like promoting a novel that you've written, which is also awesome, and the fact that you designed the cover for your own novel and are an illustrator. That's like a lot of different pursuits. So how did you sort of become said elite? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I often say that I'm just a compulsive creative with too many hobbies. It's the hardest part has actually been narrowing it down to a few things, because I think at least a lot of other creative people, we are creative in everything that we do, whether it's actually designing a website or like cooking. I'm a boss in the kitchen, and I think it all stems from that same creativity that God blessed me with. So I guess from a very young age, I loved drawing. I wanted to be an artist. Ever since I was a kid, I knew that I wanted to be an artist. I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew that was something I wanted to do. And so I don't really know where it started. I recently found an old journal filled with the most ridiculous made-up stories that from when I was 8 that are very embarrassing, but just proof that like, okay, I was doing this when I was 8 years old. You know, this is something that I was created for. But I didn't really realize that until I guess in college. I studied film originally because I thought, okay, I want to be an artist, but that doesn't make money, so I'll go into film. That was a terrible idea because film doesn't really make money either.
I beg to differ.
Well, depends. Yeah, but so I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I ended up transferring to Benedictine College and studying mass communications, again, as an outlet that I could use my creativity but also make money. Mm-hmm. But then towards the end of my experience there, I was like, I need to get an art minor. This is something that I can't not do. So I got an art minor and continued.
It's funny that was like sort of put on the like.
Yeah, I don't know.
Extra. This is like the icing on the cake, like.
I don't know why that happened.
I'm indulging myself a little bit with this art minor.
Yeah, I don't know where that mentality came from, but I've met a lot of other creatives who struggle with that same idea that like, oh, artists don't make money, the starving artist.
Yeah.
And yes, there is a reality that like a lot of us struggle. But with that comes this mentality of that it's not good enough. It's not a real job. It's not worth pursuing. So I've really had to fight that mentality throughout my life.
Who spoke that to you?
I don't know. I don't know where that came from. Because like it was never something where one person said, Becca, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. Everyone throughout my life encouraged me. They said, yeah, keep drawing. I mean, I guess maybe my parents were realistic in that they were like, okay, but think about this from a job perspective. Because I've always had my head in the clouds. I've always loved, I am an artist, So I guess they kind of encouraged me to think about the responsibility of having a job and making it work. And that was very good. I needed that. But I don't know. Honestly, I think if I'm honest with myself, it's pretty clear that mentality comes straight from the devil. Mm-hmm. Because creativity is a reflection of how we are made in the image and likeness of God, because God is the ultimate creative being. And I think that's why so many musicians, photographers, designers, artists, they struggle so much, not only to get paid, but also to convince themselves that they are worthy of being paid, and that their skill that they've spent so much time, energy, money, and resources on is actually something really good and really powerful. And naturally, because of that, Satan is going to try to stifle it. He's going to try to stifle us from living that call to creativity.
I remember being like that so I've talked to so many people, even on the podcast, like Corey Hyman has said the same thing, like getting an art degree he intentionally avoided getting an art degree so that he wouldn't have the stigma of like art, you know? And I think that even for me, when I was younger, as I was pursuing music and doing the emo band thing, I was so like, it was a dream to be on Warped Tour or whatever. But when it came to like thinking about my life, as I couldn't see myself as being a creative like dad, you know, like, or being a family man, like 40 years old and being an artist. You know what I mean? There's this like, you can do this for a little while, but then you have to grow up and get a real job. And being an artist is a lot more like drawing pictures as a hobby when you're a kid. And maybe there's certain select few people that like somehow strike gold and get discovered and are lucky, but that's not really a thing that happens. And I guess that was just my perspective when I was growing up on what like art was about. So it's interesting that you say that it's like a temptation, because not only was it in the water, you know, like I think a lot of people around me thought that way, especially being like transitioning from like homeschool to public school. But there was also this internal voice that was like, that part of you isn't important, you know, like that was always present, that I think was more of like a temptation or an insecurity that was a kind of a core thing to me. So I resonate with what you're talking about there.
Absolutely.
So like you were homeschooled though, and that's a very different type of like culture to grow up in that tends to stimulate creativity and independence a lot more. Like, tell me about growing up, like what that was like.
Absolutely. One of the things I love the most about being homeschooled was what you said, that we could be creative and that my parents valued what we were interested in. And there was that flexibility to be able to pursue what we loved. So my little siblings are still homeschooled right now. And
how many of you guys are there?
There are 4 of us. My older brother, he just got married. And then there's me, and then there's
gotcha.
I'm the second.
Gotcha.
So there's an 8-year gap between me and the next one. And his name's Gabriel, and then there's Teresa, and she is 14, 15. Oh gosh. I think she just turned 15. Oh my gosh. But yeah, so we're in the eyes of homeschooling communities, we're a tiny family, but in the eyes of the world, we're a huge family. I grew up with friends. Yeah, I had friends who have 12 to 13 siblings. So we were
look down on you like, oh, you guys like,
oh my gosh, there's only 4. Yeah. But my little sister is obsessed with birds, and I don't understand it. I love animals, but like I don't get the whole bird watching thing, but she loves it. And so my parents take her on bird watching trips as part of her education, you know, and so there's that flexibility of they recognize something in her that she loves, that she's good at, and they can work it into the curriculum. And they did the same thing for me with art. And naturally, there were certain things we had to learn, obviously, like history and science and whatever. But they made space for me to grow in my creativity. My dad let me use Photoshop on his computer when I was like 7. And obviously, at the time, I used it like paint, you know, drawing and whatever. But I was exposed to that, which impacted me later when I, in college, started learning how to do graphic design. And I took art lessons and all sorts of things that just, it just allowed me to be who I was, you know, in a way that I don't think I would have been able to do in a school setting.
One of the things I think people are like, I don't know, homeschool, I don't know about that, because if I were to do that and the sort of push on my kids' passions, then that would be the only thing they would do, and they wouldn't do anything else. And I was homeschooled for a while, and that was actually absolutely true in my life. Like, I just read books 100% of the time, and math came around, like, Marcelina and I would share answers and then run out into the creek and like play hooky. So we didn't
like
very quickly during that time in my life, and in the other areas that were not of interest to me. And yeah, so did you ever play hooky on like the stuff you didn't want to do?
Well, yes. I mentioned this earlier, but there was a time where I slacked off so much that I got 5 months worth of work behind, and my mom totally brought down the hammer and was like, no friend privileges, no phone, no nothing. This was before texting and Snapchat. You know, it was like the home phone. I couldn't use the home phone. So my friends would call and be like, is she not grounded anymore yet? And
my mom grounding like, for a host?
No, stop calling. And but it pushed me, and I cranked out 5 months of work in 5 weeks because I wanted that phone back. And so yeah, like there are certainly ways that I guess problems that could come up for a homeschooling family. But I think they're not really problems. They're just life, you know? Back in the day when the school system wasn't so rigid and compartmentalized and cookie cutter, people raised their own kids and they just taught them about life, you know? And I think there's something to that. I learned how to be who I am. I learned responsibility. I learned discipline. I learned to take responsibility for my own education and my work. And that's something that I wouldn't have gotten from just showing up at a certain time, listening, taking notes, whatever, like doing whatever I had to do to be a teacher's pet and get the right grades. You know, I wouldn't, for me anyway, I would not have learned from that. Yeah. I learned most from just kind of trying things, experimenting, my mom letting me fail from time to time, but then like helping me get back up and just keep going for it. And yeah, I struggled with math, I struggled with history, but I did my best, and we found ways for me to learn that because I'm also dyslexic. So, and a lot of people, they don't actually know what that means. And I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't actually know I was dyslexic until I was in college.
How does a dyslexic person write a book?
Good question. So I can't spell for beans. I'm terrible at spelling. Thank goodness for, for being homeschooled, because my mom didn't know I was dyslexic. She didn't know why I was struggling so hard with spelling. I swear I could not spell. That 8-year-old book that I wrote, book, it was terrible, but there are so many ridiculous spelling errors and it's comical. But she had to adapt her teaching style to match my learning style. And that's something that a classroom setting wouldn't have offered. I just would have failed all my classes and been miserable and felt like, okay, well, I can't spell. I'm going to give up. But instead, my mom found other methods to help me learn. And now, my gosh, I'll read I'll read papers by seniors in college, and there'll be grammatical errors, and I'm like, how did you miss that? Because I guess my mom just worked so hard to help me overcome that. And that's something that couldn't have happened in a classroom setting.
That is really special, because most people that I know that are dyslexic, like they sort of treat themselves as being handicapped, like, and it is a challenge, right? But like the way that if you've overcome something like that as a youth, like I think it would lend itself to a huge amount of confidence. Like, I could do a lot of other things. Like, I'm not going to let these challenges that I have hold me back. I think it's really interesting too. I saw on your website that you had branded your own homeschool, like your family school.
Yeah.
Tell me about the whole, like, the process of branding your mom's teaching.
Sure. Yeah. So she, on the one hand, she wanted to give me work because this is a new venture, being freelance. But on the other hand, she knows that there's the stigma about homeschoolers, the cringeworthy homeschoolers, that, you know, I'll tell people I was homeschooled and they're like, really? You're normal. And there's a reason for that stigma.
Yeah.
And my mom really wanted to be able to show in a very professional way that we were not that stigma. You know, we actually had a really good education. And so she wanted a logo to put on the transcripts, so that when my little siblings go to college, they can show these really professional looking transcripts to whatever college they apply to. Yeah, it's awesome. I love it. I love that she wanted to do that. And it was actually really hard though. A lot harder than I thought it was going to be, because I'm so close to it. You know, whenever you work on a project that is personal to you, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder. And she didn't really know what she wanted. That was also hard. And we're family, so that was also hard.
Yeah.
Me being like, Mom, you have to pick one thing, not everything. There's no way to put all that in a logo.
Yeah.
But what was cool about the process of branding virtually her, and her teaching style, because it's my mom who taught us, right? She's kind of almost like putting a label on herself. And I think that's why she had such a hard time picking things, was because she knew, like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is the defining thing. But the process of getting there was really good, because it helped her reflect on, like, okay, what did I give my kids that was special? What is the core of why I do what I do? Like, what is the thing that we fall back on whenever we lose sight of direction, you know? And those are questions that I wrestled with when I designed my logo as well. It was like, well, why do I create? You know, what's the point? And so we ended up with this image of a shell with the golden ratio Fibonacci number sequence kind of overlaid within it, because similar to my own drive behind my creativity, she recognized that there's such a thing as intrinsic beauty and intrinsic truth. You know, the Fibonacci numbers, the golden ratio, they're reflected all throughout nature, and they are naturally beautiful. You can't show someone a forest or a flower or something in nature that is beautiful and then say, well, that's just, you know, someone's expression of their preference. There's something mathematically true to its beauty. And I think she really wanted to get back to the fact that there is such a thing as truth, right? And there is right and wrong, and there's this kind of concrete, almost black and white element to reality, while at the same time there's so much diversity. Like, you see this golden ratio in all different areas of nature.
And it's sort of like the base of like beauty. I mean, you're sort of saying like the scripture that was the mantra that you guys picked.
Yeah. So the scripture verse that my mom kind of landed on was, I think it's Philippians 4:8. And it's the one that says, you know, whatever is lovely, whatever is good, whatever is noble, pure, righteous, all these things I can't remember exactly. Think about these things, right? And I remember reflecting on that scripture and being kind of struck by the fact that he doesn't say master these things or possess these things. He just says think about these things, and ponder them and lift your mind to them. And so for my mom's logo, or for her education teaching style, that's really just reflective of how we were allowed to just explore, explore the things we loved, explore goodness, truth, and beauty, and to think about those things and to learn about those things and surround ourselves with them. And for me as a creative, that that really strikes me, because I know that when I lift myself to things that are higher and transcendent, my creativity flows more. And through my creativity, I'm able to help other people rise their minds and hearts to things that are transcendent. And that's kind of one of my core missions too. My own logo is, it's an anchor paired with 3 sails and a lighthouse. And the anchor symbolizes hope, because it's a huge mission of mine to spread hope for people through my creativity. And the lighthouse is like evangelization, it's bringing light into the darkness. But then the 3 sails are goodness, truth, and beauty. Because I believe that, like Dostoevsky says, beauty will save the world. Goodness, truth, and beauty, they can't be argued with, you know. And when we are able to incorporate those transcendentals into our artwork, into our photography, our music, our writing, our fiction, whatever, we are spreading the gospel without words. So,
and you were a missionary, right? So like, I feel like most people that I know who have been homeschooled, that go to college and then go into mission work, there's like almost this kindred spiritedness. Like, this is actually a similar, you know, I did youth ministry and totus tuus and stuff, so like totally know what it's like to not sleep for a very long time, and lots of like really bad food and all of that. But I think like there's this almost this like bravado of that's been present in the church and in a lot of these ministries, where like unless you're doing this one-on-one sort of like discipleship, or you're actually being a missionary, you're not like living out the full gospel, you know. And then coming out of that and jumping into life and making money, it's almost like everything feels a little bit like tasteless, and the transition out can be hard. Like, what was that like for you, going from SPO mission work into being a creative and whatever?
Yeah, that was really hard for me, actually, because you also, having been homeschooled, it was always the mentality that you did your best, you know. You couldn't just disappear into the classroom. You were one of 4. Well, actually, in my case, one of 2 until my little siblings were born. And there's just this striving for excellence that was always present, and that definitely carried over. And when I was thinking about, okay, what do I want to do after college, that mentality was still there. Like, I take my faith seriously, and I want to give my all to the Lord. I'm not going to just give half. And so becoming a missionary seemed like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And yes, the Lord called me into mission work. I'm not going to get too much into like being a missionary, because I could go on forever about that. But coming out of mission work was really hard, because I had lived for 3 years with this label and this identity crutch of, yeah, I'm a missionary. Like, I'm a good Catholic because I'm a missionary. And I could throw that term around, you know. And yes, like, being in mission taught me so much about evangelization, and just being a better person, really. And it was pivotal for learning how to use my creativity as a form of mission. So I needed it. But when the Lord called me out, it was a blow to my pride, because I wanted to be one of those lifers, because there's like the few missionaries that do it for life, and I'm like,
you wanted to be a lifer?
I was like, I don't just want to be the 2-year missionary. Everyone's that. Like, I want to be the top. I want to do the best. And I mean, that's honestly probably just pride, but I wanted to please the Lord. I wanted to serve, and I didn't understand how to do that as me. And so towards the end of my 3rd year, the Lord really started speaking to me about my creativity. And he was like, Becca, I made you this way on purpose. I made you with this obsession with movies and love for books and head in the clouds, you know, everything that is who I am. He's like, I made you that way, and I want to use that. I want to use your creative drive and your artistic talents. And I kind of didn't want to hear it, actually, because I had kind of put my creativity on the back burner for 3 years. I tried to continue to like paint as a hobby or like write a poem here and there, but it was very much just like a thing that I did, a hobby. So to think about leaving mission work, which seemed so important, to do something that to me felt like a hobby was very difficult. It was difficult for me to come to terms with the fact that actually it's not just a hobby, it's a calling and it's a mission. It's what God put in the blueprint of me when he made me, you know? And to not live out that call to creativity would be, I wouldn't be being who God made me to be, you know, like I was reading.
How did you connect the dots, like between like mission work and being a creative?
As in, like, how to use creativity for evangelization, or?
It sounds like your whole value system for like what evangelization or mission was had to change during that.
Well, I think it was hard to translate a one-on-one telling us, like, helping a student in their faith life to taking a picture of someone and knowing that they feel beautiful. You know, it's a lot more hidden, a lot more subtle. But honestly, when I was able to overcome that pride of being okay with not having the label of missionary, it was pretty easy for me to see that, you know, we live, I mean, one of the reasons I became a missionary is because I feel drawn to meet a spiritual need in America. A lot of people go on mission, they will go to a foreign country to meet a bodily need, such as hunger. For me, my heart was always drawn to, there are spiritually impoverished people right outside my door. And that's the need that I wanted to meet, because we're like one of the richest countries in the world, and yet we have like the highest depression rates. And that, I know in my own life, because a little backstory, my 2 members of my family committed suicide, different times, different sides of the family. But so depression has always been kind of a sore spot, not a sore spot, but something that it tugs on my heartstrings. Whenever somebody's struggling with this, I want to meet that need. I want to help them overcome it. And what better way to combat depression than with hope, right? And in my own life, whenever I'm down, I find hope in stories. I find hope when I take a walk in nature and I'm surrounded by beauty. I find hope when somebody shows me something good, true and beautiful, right? And so it really wasn't hard for me to recognize, okay, there's this spiritual need around me, and I can meet it through my artwork, through my stories, through my photography. And it's just a matter of me being okay with the fact that other people aren't going to understand that.
Do you have any examples of stories that gave you hope when you couldn't hear it from someone who's just telling you to have hope?
Pretty much any movie I watch. Because like honestly, I'm not going to feel hopeful if someone's like, have hope, Jesus loves you, because obviously I'm already struggling to believe that. So like someone telling me isn't going to change that. But me seeing a movie or reading a book where, like, I studied film. So there's a part in the 3-act structure where everything builds up to this end of act 2 where it's the all hope is lost moment. And like, it's just the worst part of the movie or book, where like everything is wrong and you think there's no way they can overcome. Oh my God. But it always jumps back up to the climax where the hero overcomes their biggest flaw. And because of that, they're able to succeed. And it's typical, but like every time it gets me, it's wonderful. And even though I see it coming, it reminds me that there is hope. because here's this character who had some flaw or something wrong, and they hit their lowest point, but they always get back up. So, and when I write my own novels, I stick to that structure, one, because it works, but also because I think there's a reality that we can all relate to that structure. And I think it's really cool because actually Jesus' passion was the same thing, because it was the crucifixion and that was the end of Act 2, and then there was the resurrection and that was the climax. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's the hero's journey in its most like intense and like, I guess, fulfilled mythology. That's probably a really abstract way of saying it, but if you take all of the heroes' journeys that are like the most sort of archetypal heroes' journeys, you can see like the patterns in them. And if you were to just like outline all of them in terms of like, here's the moment where he goes into the cave and faces himself, like that happens with Jesus's temptation in the desert. Like it just maps over so crazily perfectly to the story of Christ. So yeah, anyway, as a novelist and a storyteller myself, like it's one of the reasons why I love Christianity so much. And I've struggled with skepticism and doubt like in all of my adult life. And it actually has been like embracing my creative center and embracing like the role of a storyteller. It has allowed me to cut through a lot of that doubt, because I just keep on being unable to escape from telling the Christ story, like it's so central to everything that I write that I'm like, man, this is just like, this is so true. I can't escape that, even though there's a lot of reasons to doubt it. So anyway, I love that.
And I love how anyone could relate to a story. It's kind of like music. It's a universal language. And for that same reason, we all experience those ups and downs, excuse me, those ups and downs. And like, it's up to us when we get to our lowest point, if we're going to get back up and like go through to the climax and overcome. And
when have you had to do that in your own life?
Okay, here's one example. Recently, not recently, 2 years ago, I had an injury to my ankle, and it ended up being a heck of a lot worse than I thought it was going to be. And it totally derailed my plans. I was living in Texas, finishing up my 3rd year of SPO. I had an apartment picked out, and a job lined up. And I was going to stay in Texas. And then I destroyed my ankle and realized that I needed surgery and a very long recovery time. So I moved back to New York unexpectedly to be with my family while I recovered from surgery. And I ended up having 2 surgeries and was home for 2 years, which was a lot longer than I thought I was going to be. And a lot of good things happened from that, and I'm grateful for it. But I also went into a depression for a little while, more than I'd ever experienced before. And also like knowing that depression runs in my family, like I recognized it immediately. I was like, I'm hitting this point, and I know how dangerous it is, and like the spiral, and I didn't know how to get out. And what it came to was recognizing and being okay with the fact that that's how I am. And like learning to be broken. And for me, I think the Lord allowed that low point specifically because I needed to learn how to receive his mercy. And that's been, still is a struggle for me, because I've always been someone who just wants to, like, I'm a perfectionist. I want to be perfect. I want to present the Lord with my perfect self. But he's like, nope, you're not perfect, and you're not letting me be God. And he was like, let me have the satisfaction of being your savior and like be okay with the fact that you're broken, be okay with the fact that you're depressed right now and you're always going to struggle with these things. And yeah, like my ankle triggered it, but a lot of the things that I went through emotionally were always there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to face it. That was how I reacted to things, and that's how I responded. And like, I've got a terrible temper and I hate that. And so the darkest aspect of it was my own, I guess, like self-loathing and not being okay with where I was at. And because I have a fantastic family who loves me so well, and they took such good care of me, and because of my experience with SPO, I was able to like keep praying and keep pushing. And honestly, I did. I read a lot of books and watched a lot of movies to remind me that there's still good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. So it was a long and drawn out process, but I was able to overcome it. And not only overcome it, but start to learn habits that I needed to develop to continually overcome this. Because even though I was at my lowest point with my ankle, those tendencies and those thoughts of like like turning against myself I know they're going to keep coming back. Whenever something on in my exterior is really negative, my interior is going to turn negative. My ankle, like I was okay with the fact that I have a bad ankle now. I'd come to terms with that, but that didn't change the reality that it was a lot of stress. And I think exterior stress, even if it's good stress, like maybe someone's getting married, they're going to feel stressed. The external physical realities that we exist in, they affect our internal spiritual realities. So I don't think I handled it very well, but the fact that I had to go through it, I had to kind of have this trial by fire. It taught me so much and has slowly, gradually helped me overcome certain things and recognize my need for the Lord's mercy and develop a devotion.
What were some of the concrete things that you had to, habits that you had to acquire in order to?
Good question.
Right.
So a lot of discipline in very basic things. So like having a schedule and waking up at the same time, eating well, exercising.
What were the actual things though that you did? Like you learned to
in order
to get up early, or how'd you do it?
How'd I do it? I just did it. I don't know. You set an alarm and you don't snooze it. You put on the workout clothes even though you don't feel like working out, so that your mom sees you and is like, "So you going to the gym?"
That's totally that makes a lot of sense.
My family has a prayer room, so I would go to the prayer room and I'd sit there until I prayed. So yeah, I guess just and again, that kind of goes back to being homeschooled. That's in my head, it's on me. I have to decide to do it, and it's not easy. I set my alarm for the first time this morning in a week, so I'm one to talk, right? But but I think I didn't recognize how important those things were, and how much they affected me internally. But just having things that I set in my life, I'm like, okay, this is my goal, and this is how I'm going to get there, and I'm just going to do it. That helped me a lot, and keeping busy and keeping myself outward focused helped a lot, especially. And that's what I'll tell people. A lot of people who struggle with depression, they are told by a lot of other people, "Oh, you're so good. It's fine. Those mean people are so mean to you," and they're kind of almost turned against the world.
Yeah.
But that doesn't help. That turns them more inward. And the more inward I turned, the darker I got inside. And so really it was being dragged to a community service event or something that I really didn't want to do, that turned me outward. And that's where I started to be like, oh my gosh, yeah, humanity is good. It's true. It's beautiful. There's something here worth fighting for.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a messy it's a messy thing, and I still haven't quite figured it all out. But yeah.
That was also the time when you wrote your book, right?
Yes.
Season. So like, in order to write a book, I mean, anyone that has tried to consistently cultivate a writing habit, like, knows that it's like going through labor. Like, it is harrowing. Sitting down to the blank page is like the most terrifying thing in the world. And every possible distraction that you could possibly think of, like, immediately starts to plague you as soon as you're like working on it.
Yeah.
It takes an incredible amount of like virtue and sort of I'm 31, and this is the first year that I've actually cultivated like, I've wanted to all my life, and this is the first time I've successfully cultivated an everyday writing practice, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, I would love to hear how going through the dark night sort of ended up with this beautiful product at the end, like this gift of love to the world, of the story.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it really started with I had been thinking about this novel for a long time, and I'd been wanting to write a novel since I was 8 at least. And so I think I want to say it had been like 5 years since I got this idea and started writing down little notes and outlines and character sketches and just things that I wanted to apply to the story. But I was scared to just start because I hadn't figured out all the answers yet. You know, I hadn't outlined it to a T of like, okay, well, what is this person going to do when this happens? And I couldn't actually know the answer to that until I wrote it. And actually, it was a friend of mine, George Pappas, probably doesn't even remember this, but I was sitting on my hammock. He served with me in SPO. I was sitting on my hammock reading a book about writing. And he came up to me and was like, he asked me about it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to write a book, because at this point I had written like a first chapter, and that was so good. But I like put it away again and like tried figuring more things out. And he asked me what my story was about, and I could not for the life of me answer him. And he totally called me out, and he's like, you need to learn that, like, you need to figure out what your story's about. And so it ended up being an indecision thing. I just had to like pick something and move forward. But
what's the story about?
Oh gosh. How dare you? No, it's a story. It's a dystopian novel about forgiveness, and it follows the story of Tabitha Clay, whose only chance at reuniting / resolving her issues with her estranged father are by hunting him down for the corrupt authorities. So it's very much a
sounds dramatic and dark.
It's a dystopian, you know, like
I know.
Hunger Games, Divergent, like it's not quite as graphic as those, but yeah, it's very much about her internal war with herself and deciding if she wants to rescue her dad or get revenge on him, because both seem like viable options to her. Because he abandoned her and her twin and her dying mother 3 years prior to when the story takes place.
Wow.
So yeah, that's what it's about. But another friend of mine called me out as well. I can't remember if it was George or if it was someone else, but somebody said to me, Becca, just write. Actually, no, Abe Gross. Do you know Abe Gross?
Yeah.
Another musician. All these wonderful creative people in my life. Also served with him in SPO. But he's like, you just need to write. Just write. And I'm like, that's the last thing I want to hear. I want someone to say, just plan some more, just outline some more, just beat around the bush some more. Because ultimately I was procrastinating by outlining. And while outlining, I think, is really important, you don't want to just totally go in blind. I just needed to put a pen to paper, or rather fingers to a keyboard. And so when I broke my ankle, I say I broke my ankle, I destroyed my ankle, but I'm not going to get into that. When I destroyed my ankle and moved home and got my surgery, and when I was finally kind of, all the medications were wearing off, my head was less foggy. I was like, okay, I'm going to be stuck here for a few months. I have no excuse now not to write this novel.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started. I just started writing, and it was lousy at first. Everything that was coming out was like, this is just crap. I don't like any of this.
Yeah.
But I'd read a lot of things that other writers had said, and they were like, you have to have a writing routine. You have to have a daily writing schedule. And me being a stubborn mule, I was like, that's not how I work, you know? My muse doesn't show up every day, and I like to sprint, not run. Because I'm very much like, I like to crank things out all at once, and then like
5 months, 5 weeks,
not do anything for forever.
Yeah.
But it wasn't working. It wasn't working. And I knew it wasn't working. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try this whole 500 word a day thing. And I'm going to stick with it. And I'm going to sit there until I write 500 words at least. And then I can stop. And because I was at home, I didn't have a job at the time because I was still in recovery. And when I did get a job, it was just part-time. So even then, I didn't have like a social life or anything because all my friends had moved away except for like one or two. So I was like, I have no excuse. There's never going to be another time when I have this much time to just sit around and write. And so I challenged myself to 500 words a day. And before I knew it, the book was written. Honestly, like it was insane because every time I did that, I was training my mind to be creative at that time of day. I didn't always write at the same time, but it was usually in the morning or in the evening. And so the muse showed up when I called it. It wasn't like I could only write when I had this creative urge, but the creative urge knew to come every day for the span of 500 words at least. And most days I would write 1,000, 1,500 words.
Oh, wow.
My chapters are like between 2,000 and 3,000 words. So like over the course of a couple of days, I'd write a chapter. And that kind of, I work well when I have checklists. So if I can like hit a milestone and then keep going, it helps me to keep going. And so because it was every day, every week, I was able to crank it out in 10 months. And the first draft was not very good. I mean, it was my first book. There was a lot I wanted to change. So I went back and I actually ended up spending a year just really getting it to where I wanted it to be, and then designing the cover and figuring out how to self-publish, and all that stuff was a huge learning process. But yeah, it just takes discipline, and it takes sticking with it when it's not working, because eventually it's going to work and you're going to go back and change it all anyway. So who cares if it sucks? Yeah. You just got to get it done.
Seriously. I resonate with that very deeply. So, how did you move from being in writing mode to being a freelance designer?
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say back to normal life.
Yeah, back to normal life. I mean,
like, oh my gosh, stopping when I would stop writing a chapter and go have dinner with my family. It was that was so weird because I'd be like in fiction mode. And sometimes I would get a little delirious and forget what was real and what wasn't. My family would be like, Becca, come on. Okay, so switching to graphic design and like freelance work. When I was in SPO, there were times that we would have to remind ourselves that things were work. We'd be like, okay, I just went and saw a movie with a student, but that was work because actually I'm developing a relationship with them and we're in the field of relational evangelization, right? So there were things like we started learning how to say, okay, yes, those hours were put towards work, and like it's in a sense a worthy cause. It's not just like an extra thing I do after work or like a hobby, right?
Right.
So I've had to remind myself that it's okay for me to write, and because I work my own hours and I'm a freelancer, I'm allowed to spend a few hours writing a chapter if I need to, and that's something that a lot of people don't have the privilege of doing. I recognize that if you're coming home from a 9-to-5 job and then you have to write those 500 words a day, it's a lot harder. I'm really privileged in the fact that I can choose to write in the morning if I want. or I can choose to write in the middle of the day because I can move my schedule around how I see fit. But I guess it depends. There have been times when I had a big project that had like a due date. I'm like, okay, I can't spend all day writing these chapters when really I need to be getting this website developed, you know? So it's just a matter of priority, but then also remembering that my book is a priority and it has to be a priority. Otherwise it's never going to be written. So I would just, on days when I had a lot more freelance work that I had to get done, I would write 500 words, but then I'd stop at 500 words. But then other days, if I'm on a roll and if I don't have a lot of other stuff that's timely, I'll just let myself write. And they're different compartments of my job, but ultimately I would love to be able to just be an author. And that's not going to happen if I put it on the back burner. Even though it's not making money really now because everything I make goes right back into it, that doesn't mean it never will. But it won't if I treat it like it never will, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah. All of that to say, like, how did you come to the point of really starting to see this, I guess, creative business as a, like, something that was valuable, that was a vocation that really was supposed to make money? I mean, all of that, like, how did you overcome the whole stigma that was placed on it when you were growing up?
Good question. I think having been a missionary and fundraising my salary helped with that because
a lot of that shame, man.
Oh my gosh, it was hard. But it was so good because it really drove home the concept that the Lord is taking care of me, the Lord is providing for me, that my money isn't mine, it's not even earned, it's given by God. And yeah, I have to work for it. He's not gonna like be like, okay, you don't have to work at all, but you're gonna be filthy rich. No. But it is from him. And having that mentality helped me a lot with freelance work because I do believe that he has called me into creative professional work because I had the option to do other things. I was working in marketing and I'm good at marketing. I was a social media manager. I was getting paid 9 to 5, whatever. But I was so restless and I knew that I was sacrificing, I guess, my passion projects for a 9 to 5. And everybody's different. Everybody has different energy levels. But like for me, if I'm designing for an agency from 9 to 5 and then I come home, I don't want to design more things. You know, I want to stop. And so it was kind of a question of, well, which would I rather? Would I rather have the stability of a steady paycheck, or would I rather have the flexibility of being able to do the projects that I care about for the businesses that I choose, and like have time to write and to do artwork and to potentially explore those things that have never really made me any money, but could if I actually put the time into it. And after that, it was like, okay, the choice is pretty easy. I know what I want, but I'm scared. And I wanted to do freelance work full time for a very long time, but I didn't think it was possible, and I was afraid. And so when I finally took the plunge, it came down to realizing that I was missionary for 3 years. I fundraised my salary. That seemed impossible. But through the generosity of others, but ultimately through God's grace and his providence, I was able to succeed. And it's really no different because in freelance, you don't know when someone's going to need a website made or when someone's going to call you up and be like, hey, will you take pictures? I've gone a couple months without making anything from freelance work. It'd be like little tiny side projects, and it's scary, and it takes a lot of trust. But so did fundraising, and it's not something I've gotten the hang of yet. I'm still like every every few days or so, I feel like I freak out thinking that the Lord's not going to provide. But then I remember, no, he made me this way. There's a need for what I have to offer. There's a need for good, wholesome stories, honestly, for hope and for mercy. And like, I can give that the way that God made me. And if that's the case, and if he made me this way, and if he's calling me to do this thing, he's going to make it possible. He's not going to leave me out to dry. And so for me, it's just taking a lot of courage and a lot of trust. And then also just discipline and learning how the heck to do this. You know, how much do I charge? How do I write up a contract? You know, all these things, you got to figure it out. But from a spiritual standpoint, it's all a matter of, if God wants me to do this, he's going to make it possible.
Yeah. A leap of faith for sure. Do you have any like advice? I know we're kind of coming up on our time here, like any parting concrete advice for those who are perhaps looking at the plunge or have just taken it and are struggling with that sort of trust?
Trying to narrow it down to one thing. I guess just know who God is and like continually learn who God is, because when you, at least for me, when I would forget God's mercy and God's love and God's creativity, and started relying on my own efforts, my own human weak efforts, is when I would fail. Not only in making money, because he'd be like, wake up, like, I have it, come get it. But also in being creative. Like I would get in writer's block. I would have no motivation and whatnot. And I think it's important that we actually draw from God's creativity, especially in our culture. Art and anything creative, music especially, it's very much like a self-expression thing. It's like, I just want to, I don't know, throw myself out there for the world. Please understand me, you know?
Yeah, it's almost like voyeurism, right? Like,
yeah, it's just too self-centered. And I mean, I do that too. You know, I create something, I'm like, there's a bit of me in this, and it's really cool. But also, you know, God is the most creative being in the universe, and he decided to share some of that with us. And if we allow him to be creative through us, it's going to be 10 times better than anything we come up with. And I experienced that recently. I hit a major writer's block. I didn't write for like at least a week, maybe even 2. And I was like, Lord, I need you to write this sequel. And then boom, like all these ideas came, and I just had so much to draw from. And so, yeah, just like never put God on the back burner. He just wants relationship with us, and everything is for him. All of our creativity, it's meant to glorify him. And when we forget that how much he loves us and how much we are just made to be in union with the Trinity, and like, what is that? That's crazy. You know, we were created to live the life of God in the Trinity, in love. And when we view our lives through that perspective and like actually just go back to those basic truths, everything looks different. You know, what we create means more. And like why we get up in the morning has a reason. So yeah, and like, even he cares about the little things. He cares about our paycheck. So even just remembering to lay our fears and cares at his feet and be like, Lord, how am I going to pay rent? I don't know how I'm going to do this. And just placing that at his feet, taking time to know him and to know that he wants us to place it at his feet so he can pick it up for us. It's made all the difference in my life. And it's always when I lose sight of who he is, that I just fall flat on my face. So he's there. He wants to help us. He wants to make it possible and pave the way for us to live this calling of creativity that he's placed on our hearts.
That is quite a profound sign off. I'd say that's a mic drop.
Drop the mic.
Bam! That is so good. Thank you so much for like jumping on. And I am personally like really edified by the conversation. I'm like so pumped for tomorrow morning's writing session. So I'm ready to get into
Keep it up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And we would love to see you at the summit. Are you going to come?
When is it again?
September 13th through the 16th.
And where is it?
In Dallas. So you only have a small drive. Yeah.
How much is it?
It's going to be about $450 for the weekend.
Okay. Can you send me that information?
Totally.
So I can like put it in my calendar and look at it. Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. I would love to be there.
Yeah, we definitely want you there. I think this is sort of post podcast conversation here, but cool. Yeah, I think that you would be like, what I've just really been seeing the Lord doing with kind of the movement has been that like, I think the people who are, you're sort of like one of the prophets in a way by the way that you're approaching like your own creative life, like you're living as a mystic, and that's underneath all of the other things that you're doing, you know? And because of that, you're able to speak and communicate about like spiritual things in a way that I think will for sure set other people free to be that themselves, you know? Mm-hmm. So I really think it's like, this is not only your people in terms of, man, you would love it, but the community could use you too.
Got to build that creative mass.
Seriously, it's the only way. I mean, yeah, like I think that God is just doing something really big with, within the church in terms of like dredging up this whole idea of leading with beauty. And it's so much more, I feel like discipleship was sort of like the major, like last sort of 20 years or like the last generation. It was what God was really like trying to call us to. And I feel like the next 20 are going to be really characterized by like the creatives and creativity. And we're sort of at the very beginning of that, but
it's neat too, because we needed the discipleship phase first.
Yeah.
At least like in a micro example, like me being a missionary first was necessary for me to see my creativity as that, you know?
Yeah.
And the world needs that too, because in art history, like where we're at artistically is all self-expression, and it's all like pushy and just it's lost to the goodness, the truth, and the beauty, and it's just like they're considered art because it can be put in a museum, you know?
Yeah. So anyway, thanks for jumping on. It means a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Thanks for asking, or for, I guess you didn't ask, but for everything that you guys do. It's awesome, and it's really cool to be part of the Catholic Creatives group and to recognize that there's other people out there who are normal, cool people who can tell the difference between a good and a bad logo, but then are also super Catholic.
Yeah, I know. It definitely feels good to know that you're around some people that are kindred spirits, or at least that they exist out there.
Yeah.
How did you get connected to it? What was your?
Somebody invited me to the group. I don't remember who. But yeah, I think that was pretty much it. I just like started paying attention to what people were posting, and I thought it was really cool that so many of my friends were on there. Like people from Benedictine, people from SPO. I'm like, oh my gosh. I never realized how many creative Catholics I knew until they were like on a list on Facebook. Like, whoa, that's so cool. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I mean, I've like met a lot of people in the group. But that's it. I've never been to any like actual events with people.
Have you hung out with like Nick McCann and all the other Austinites that are in the group?
I don't actually know them.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I like
Nick would be fast friends.
I really want to get involved with YCP, Catholic professionals, and just like actually meet people because I know a lot of people in Texas, but not in Austin.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to find out though about when people are getting together and like how to jump in on that. So
nobody, yeah, I mean, this is the whole thing with Catholic creatives is that like it's scaling, you know, and there's not a like we've made the meetup model, but the execution of the meetup model isn't something that it doesn't scale like a YCP event, you know, like YCP, it's like you have a speaker,
organized.
It's like, and it's just straight. I mean, as basic like of programming as you can possibly get. And that's just so not the thing that caters and ministers to creatives directly. So yeah.
I feel like we should just, well, again, having been a missionary, like I know how important it is to have organization and like a structure and everything, but maybe just be like, okay, this one person is in charge of organizing a hangout. We're all going to go to this bar in Austin and like anyone in the area can go and just like meet up, but just like super chill, no agenda.
Yeah.
But then that doesn't always work because then you have there's still got to be someone who's organizing it, you know.
I think it works though. Like the way that the model has started to like surface or whatever is that a local group will basically start with a person doing exactly like what you're talking about, where they'll just say, hey, everybody in the group that's in Austin, like let's meet here at this time and we'll rally it, and that's called a hangout. And then once one of those has sort of like successfully happened in a region, then the national sort of like me and Marcelino will partner with like that person to put on a more like formal meetup. Yeah. It's like a little bit more
well, that's cool.
Like a design sprint in the evening for like taking a challenge and then all like collaborating on it. And each one of those will be like designed more specific for that like local community. Like New York was much more of a like actors specific kind of evening, and
that's cool.
Yeah, Detroit was like more marketing, and Austin I think would probably be more design focused, maybe, or film. But there's a lot of us out there in Austin, and some of the coolest people that are in the group, quite frankly, are out there. So you totally need to meet them. I'm gonna link you up with Nick right after we get off, and then also we're doing the production for the 8 Beats film, like the Team Texas one, July, and that means like a lot of us will all be there at the same time, so we should definitely hang out at that point.
Sure. Yeah, be sweet.
Yeah,
I need more friends. Oh, I don't need more friends. I need more Austin friends. I have plenty of friends all over the country and maybe even the world, but
the Austin friends,
like people to actually live life with.
Yeah. Well, I will give you some good options. That's my goal.
Okay. Friend matchmaking.
Yeah. Friend matchmaking.
That was like my whole job in SBO. It was so much fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Cool. Well, hey, I'm going to let you get to the rest of your day, but thank you so much again, and I'm looking forward to a long and fruitful artistic friendship.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
Just let me know about the summit and let me know when this is going to appear and where.
Okay. We will, we'll follow up.
Okay, cool.
So, all right.
Awesome. Thank you.